So Maya, since you've been an activist for a while, how should we start our gender equality group?
Talking about sexual harassment at school is a way to start.
It's a kind of sex discrimination that happens all the time. We're hearing so much about sexual harassment and assault in college,
But people don't realize the problem starts way before college.
Sexual harassment makes me nervous, even sick to my stomach. It's hard to concentrate in class.
What about the horrible cases where kids commit suicide from sexual harassment and cyber harassment? Do people think those are just isolated incidents?
Why aren't people talking about this more?
It's complicated. Most kids don't report because they're afraid of being blamed, and if they do report, the school often ignores or denies it.
Basically, schools shut down complaints to protect their reputation and avoid lawsuits. Schools aren't even collecting data on harassment as they're supposed to, so people don't know how serious the problem really is.
Yeah, remember Yasmin's family? They had to move to another school district because the school wasn't doing anything about sexual harassment.
How can schools get away with doing nothing?
We can change that. Most people don't know that there's a law called Title IX that says schools must protect students from sex discrimination.
I read that sex discrimination is one reason why there are more boys and girls in STEM classes.
What's STEM?
It stands for science, technology, engineering, and math.
Okay.
Sex discrimination also happens against pregnant and parenting students. But if we're going to fix the problem, we have to understand why sex discrimination exists and why it's so harmful. I've seen some really good videos that I thought maybe I could share with our group, like a TEDx talk called The Sexy Lie by this professor named Caroline Heldman. The video was about how sexual objectification would lead to sexual harassment and assault.
Here's a video talk she made for us.
She did that?
Here.
Hello, and thanks for inviting me to talk to your Gender Equity Club. I want to speak with you today about a very important civil rights issue. Civil rights are the rights that we all have as individuals to be treated fairly, regardless of our race, ethnicity, sex, gender identity, or sexuality. The civil rights issue I want to talk about today is the widespread sexual harassment and sexual violence in K-12 schools. Many students are simply not being treated fairly or lawfully. Students face many different types of sexual violence. Sexual harassment includes unwanted words, sounds, or gestures of a sexual nature. Sexual battery is unwanted sexual touching outside of clothing, while sexual assault is unwanted sexual touching inside clothing. And rape is unwanted sexual penetration. Each year, at least 56% of girls, 40% of boys, and 75% of transgender students experience sexual harassment in K-12 schools. When it comes to sexual violence, at least 20% of school-age girls and 3% of school-age boys experience sexual battery, assault, or rape. And half of transgender people experience sexual violence during their lifetime. Female students face more sexual harassment and sexual violence than male students because our society has made it normal to treat girls and women like objects instead of people. We are surrounded by images of sexually objectified women that teach us that women are first and foremost valued by how appealing others find our bodies. When people see women only as sex objects that exist for others, then women are not regarded as full human beings. And dehumanizing a group is the first step in justifying violence against that group. Treating women as sex objects is part of our broader rape culture. Rape culture is an environment where sexual violence against women and genderqueer people is considered normal and even excused in popular culture. As young Americans, you are exposed to a steady stream of sexual violence in television shows, movies, videos, and all of this makes this sort of violence seem normal. Another part of rape culture is that sexual violence isn't taken seriously. When rape survivors come forward, they are often not believed and even blamed for a crime that's been perpetrated against them. Their friends and family often turn on them. And male survivors are especially shamed when they report an experience of sexual violence. Our legal system is no better. Police and prosecutors don't enforce laws against rape in an effective way, so shockingly, only 2% of rapists will ever see a day in jail. Sexual harassment and sexual violence are civil rights issues, and as a student, you have the right to be in an educational space that is free of harassment and violence. It's up to each and every one of us to make sure that all students' rights are respected and protected. It starts with us. It starts by making a commitment to treat fellow students the way you want to be treated. It means reporting sexual harassment and assault to school officials. And it also means supporting students who have the courage to come forward to report that they've experienced sexual harassment or violence. Thank you for reaching out to learn more about these topics. Your group is doing great work, and more students should be coming together and working with their community to address students' civil rights. Understanding sexual objectification, rape culture, and civil rights is just the beginning. Taking actions, as you are doing, will help create safer learning spaces that treat everyone with respect. Thank you.
That totally makes sense. When our school doesn't address sexual harassment, it's just like our society not addressing it.
And when we make change at our school, we're changing society.
What should we do?
Well, first for today, I plan to show some real cases of sexual harassment and assault so kids see it can happen to anyone. I set up some Skypes with experts to explain students' rights under Title IX and what to do when those rights are violated. We can show how schools are supposed to treat students who are harassed.
Maybe we can even brainstorm ideas about activities we can do at our school and with community organizations.
This is going to take longer than I thought.
Not that long. People need this information now. We can't wait until college when it only gets worse.
So what about those pictures you asked me to draw?
I made a PowerPoint to explain sex discrimination.
I want every student to have an equal opportunity to participate fully in all activities. That's true regardless of their race, religion, gender, or sexual orientation.
The federal civil rights law, Title IX, says that no student should be discriminated against because they're male, female, gay, trans, or doesn't conform to gender stereotypes.
If a school has a boys' basketball team, then girls must have an opportunity to participate on a girls' basketball team.
A school counselor can't advise a student against taking technology or science courses just because she's female.
In classrooms, teachers must treat students of all genders equally. Learning materials can't reinforce gender stereotypes, like men always being shown in leadership roles and not women.
And the school can't prevent students who are pregnant or parenting from participating in school activities.
Harassing or assaulting a student because they're male, female, gay, trans, or gender non-conforming can be a kind of discrimination that is prohibited by Title IX.
Sexual harassment doesn't always happen in person. It can occur over social media or through text and email.
It could be sexual touching or gestures, verbal sexual abuse, graffiti, and sexual contact without consent, including sexual assault and hazing.
It can occur at school or outside of school, on school buses, or at school-sponsored activities such as sporting events, dances, or field trips.
A perpetrator can be another student, a teacher, or other school staff.
Sexual harassment in K-12 schools happens a lot more often than you think. In one national survey, 81% of students in grades 8 through 11 reported they experienced sexual harassment, and 87% felt it had a negative impact.
Among LGBTQ students, approximately 87% suffer verbal harassment, and 40% are physically harassed.
They skip school far more often because they do not feel safe, and are twice as likely as straight students to be threatened or injured with a weapon at school.
40% of LGBTQ students have seriously considered suicide, and 29% report having attempted suicide during the past 12 months. They are 3 times more likely than straight students to be raped.
Sexual violence and persistent sexual harassment cause real emotional, educational, and economic damage to students and families. Feeling unsafe at school is associated with poor grades, skipping school, and dropping out. Some students never get over it. They commit suicide.
I want to show you a few real cases. These might be disturbing.
Hi there. I'm Lauren, a senior in high school and a rape survivor taking a stand to end sexual assault. The summer after my sophomore year, I was raped by a fellow student I was dating. From the moment I started confiding in my support system about what happened to me, I was shut down. I kept hearing things like, "That's what happens when you're in a relationship. Get over it. Why are you still hung up on this?" This made me not want to report my rape and not even believe I was assaulted. I was never informed of my rights under Title IX of federal civil rights law by any school I have been to or informed of my legal rights as a survivor. There should have been education, accommodations, and support for survivors, but instead, there was silence and denial.
My sexuality is I'm straight. I'm in the lawsuit because I'm more feminine than masculine. For me, I just don't think that you should have to be like what your gender is, because you are you. Your heart and your mind is the most important thing. I have been called faggot, fag boy, the gay god, dumbass bitch, all kinds of different names, and they hurt. If I saw someone coming, I'd just bolt down that hallway. I'd do anything just to get away. It was a fight. I was afraid and very paranoid. I felt very depressed all the time and very sad. Like I hated myself. I just didn't feel like myself anymore. When I heard about Justin, it bothered me so much. He was such a happy person. How could you drive someone to have so much anguish and so much pain and regret of their own life that they would take it away? I nearly killed myself because I was so afraid and I didn't feel welcome. I didn't feel like myself. I didn't know so many people were going through the things I was. Joining in with the lawsuit has made me feel more accepted, and I'm just overall no longer paranoid. When I walked down the halls before, I would usually cover up my face or something because I was afraid. Recently, I've been feeling welcome. They're listening and are following advice. You might feel worthless, but the truth is, if you are able to walk down the hall one day and still be living the next, after going through that much trouble, you are the toughest person I've ever met.
Hi, I'm Carrie Goldberg. I'm a lawyer in Brooklyn whose practice includes victims of sexual violence in K-12 schools. I want to speak about 3 heartbreaking cases involving girls aged 13 to 15 who attended public schools in low-income Brooklyn neighborhoods. All are girls of color. In one case, the victim was 13 years old when a male peer raped her outside of their Brooklyn public school, videoed it, and distributed the footage via social media to his friends, causing it to swiftly go viral throughout the school. Rather than treating her with care and compassion, school administrators treated her as if she had a contagious disease. Her mother reports being told, "Your daughter's presence is a distraction. It's causing the video to stay in circulation. She should just stay home for a while." As a result, the New York City Department of Education is presently under investigation by the United States Department of Education Office of Civil Rights for mandating that a victim of sexual assault stay home and be punished. We recently filed 2 other complaints at our firm with the Office of Civil Rights, all alleging that the victims also were punished for reporting a sexual assault. There is no question these victims and others like them are among the least likely to access justice. They're too young to go out and find a lawyer in the unlikely event they or their parents even realize their rights have been violated. Girls of color who are wrongfully over-sexualized in our culture are not believed, told they asked for it, or told their participation was consensual. And that's just at the reporting stage. Many K-12 cases never even reach the stage where the offender is disciplined, or if they do, it's for the school to discipline the victim. For example, in one case, the victim, a 15-year-old with an IQ of 71, was taken to a stairwell at lunch by 7 boys, forced to provide oral sex on 2 of them while the others watched and stood guard. Formal suspension proceedings were brought against the girl after she reported the incident because the vice principal in that case determined the gang rape was consensual. In all 3 of our cases, the knee-jerk reaction was to require that the victims transfer school. In 2 cases, administrators told the victims' parents it was policy for victims and not offenders to transfer. In 1 case, the offender was welcomed back to school after a month-long suspension. In that case, the offender had thrown a 13-year-old girl to the ground and stimulated sex on top of her, while a second boy held her head down and slapped it. The school threatened the victim's mom with child protective services when the mom refused to allow her child to continue going to that school. This, despite the New York City Department of Education's inability to come up with a school for that victim to transfer into. I've witnessed it with my own eyes, and with conviction, I can say that we have not dealt with sexual assault of young people as the public health and educational crisis that it is. These problems are not limited to low-income schools. When schools proactively address sexual harassment and violence, and when they properly respond, we can turn this crisis around. But until that happens, it's essential that families, students, their allies, and the community work together to hold schools accountable. Please reach out to students, especially to those who lack family support. Talk to them about sexual harassment and let them know you are there to support their rights. Thank you.
My name is Christine McComas. This is my family the summer before our daughter Grace, on the far left, started high school. We live in one of the wealthiest counties in the nation, where the school system is considered world-class. Yet unchecked sexual harassment was the norm during my daughter's time in middle and high school. Blatant sexual actions in school were ignored, including boys humping desks, unwelcome touch, and suggestive statements. When the 8th grade class took a field trip to their future high school, the girls were subject to open, abrasive verbal sexual harassment there as well. Our daughter Grace was a bubbly, active teen who got off to a great start in high school, even being chosen for a county-wide leadership program. This photo is from her first formal dance the fall of her freshman year. Sadly, this is the only formal Grace ever went to. She's dead. At the end of her freshman year, at age 14, Grace fell victim to an uninvestigated drug-assisted sexual assault, followed by months of sexual harassment and cyberbullying until her death by suicide on Easter Sunday. Although her school was aware of all events from the very beginning, it failed to protect or inform us of Grace's Title IX rights. Grace's story illustrates how anyone, including well-adjusted students from affluent school districts, can fall victim to sexual harassment and assault. Cyber abuse, which is largely hidden from adults, and the constant digital interconnectedness of teens exacerbates the dangers of an already treacherous situation. Parents are oblivious to these new dangers, and schools hide and deny anything that tarnishes their reputation. We must take off our blinders. No family is immune from the devastation of sexual harassment, sexual assault, cyber abuse, and the deplorable, unlawful response from schools. With over 80% of students reporting sexual harassment, it's likely that your child or a friend has been harassed or assaulted too. And likely, cyber abuse or bullying followed. Ashamed, afraid, and unheard, many of these children go on to self-harm or attempt to take their own lives. If our school had followed common decency and Title IX, Grace would likely be alive today. Grace's law in Maryland will now protect children from repeated vicious cyber abuse. However, this protection and the enforcement of Title IX law needs to happen nationally immediately.
That's awful.
It's disgusting. Horrible.
I read that most kids doing the harassing say they were harassed before they started harassing other students.
So it's a cycle. The most harassed kids don't ask anyone for help, especially teachers or counselors or their parents. So they suffer and become the harassers.
But it's the school's job to stop the harassment.
But since our school isn't doing enough, we need a Stop Sexual Harassment campaign.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Suicides like Grace's happen more often than people know. We saw that Kyle almost killed himself. I read online that in his district, 8 kids killed themselves in 2 years.
Suicides have caused schools to be investigated because they violated the victim's Title IX rights.
We can talk with clubs like Suicide Prevention and Stop Bullying and explain how Title IX protects them when there's cybersexual harassment.
We have to involve the guys. They think it's funny when it's not. One of my friends was raped and she tried to kill herself. It happened to a guy I knew too.
If guys understand they can be victims too, they might do more about stopping the problem.
Right. And this is important. We need to talk about how 10% of students, guys included, are sexually abused by school staff, like teachers, coaches, bus drivers.
That's a lot. They're probably afraid to tell anyone. We should definitely talk about how adults at schools sexually harass their students.
Some kids might think it's cool to be in a relationship with a teacher, but it's really unhealthy.
And it affects their learning.
If the school knows and covers it up, it's a violation of that student's Title IX rights.
So when we talk to parents or community organizations, what are we saying about younger kids?
They need to pay attention. There are thousands of sexual harassment and assault cases in elementary and middle school every year.
Even though many cases are never reported, there are at least 4,000 sexual assaults each year inside public schools, and 800 rapes or attempted rapes.
There's an article we can use from the Washington Post that shows how K-12 sexual assault is coming to light. It says an organization called Stop Sexual Assault in Schools is exposing this epidemic.
We can show parents some of the cases on their website.
Looks like a lot of elementary school assaults happen in the bathroom or on the playground or on school buses. The website also has reports on boys, not just girls, getting sexually assaulted in all grades, starting in kindergarten.
I've been reading up on this. Older guys are trying to prove their masculinity by humiliating younger guys because that's what they think masculinity is all about. There are a lot of disgusting hazing cases that are actually sexual assaults.
There are so many cases where the harasser, not the victim, is protected because someone in the harasser's family has some power.
Or the harasser is a star athlete or a teacher and gets away with it. And then they go and do it to somebody else.
We need to plan our Skype. Remember, Title IX protects students in all educational programs that get money from the government, and even some private schools.
Hi. Thanks for contacting the National Women's Law Center. I understand you're starting a gender equality club in your high school and that you want to find out about Title IX.
But how can we interest other students? What can we tell them so they'll care about gender equity?
Well, they should care because even though we've come a long way since Title IX was passed over 40 years ago, we're not there yet. So sexual harassment, sexual assault, and more generally, sex discrimination can happen to anyone, anytime. And unfortunately, we know that it's happening in schools across the country. Research shows, and we hear from parents and students regularly, that kids are leaving their schools because they do not feel safe. We also know that the long-term effects of sexual harassment and assault are far worse than people think. And Title IX is a federal law that prohibits sex discrimination in education programs that receive any federal money. And just like sex discrimination and harassment are not allowed in the workplace, they're not allowed in schools either. This includes all public schools and also some private schools that receive federal funding.
What happens if a student reports a sexual assault to the school?
Great question. Title IX requires schools to address sex discrimination and harassment right away. So, for example, if a student says they were sexually harassed or assaulted, the school has to investigate immediately and also protect the student from any further harassment while the investigation is going on. The school's job is to make sure the student's education continues without further harassment or hostility. And even if criminal charges are filed and the police says there was no crime committed, the school still has to investigate and protect the student.
So who makes sure the school follows Title IX?
Title IX is enforced mainly by the Office for Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Education, which we typically call OCR. It's pretty simple to file a complaint with OCR if you believe your rights have been violated. There's an online form and anyone can file on your behalf.
Most kids in our school think that sexual harassment is something we have to put up with. How do we explain why they should do something about it?
It helps to explain that it can interfere with the student's ability to get an education. It can take a physical, emotional, educational, and even economic toll on students. Sexual harassment can lead to students dropping out of school, which makes it harder for them to go to college or get good jobs. And I think helping people understand the damage that sexual harassment causes can show them why it needs to be addressed in elementary and middle school, because it's much better to address it early and quickly before it gets worse.
Are some kids more likely to get sexually harassed than others?
Studies do show that girls, and especially girls of color and LGBTQ students, are more likely to suffer sexual harassment and violence.
Can you explain more about girls of color?
Sure. Girls of color face barriers such as attending schools with fewer academic and extracurricular opportunities. They also face more frequent and harsher discipline than white girls for similar offenses. They are facing higher rates of sexual harassment and violence, and also encounter stereotypes that may affect how school officials react to them.
Should our school have told us about Title IX, especially because we're hearing more about sexual assault in Title IX in colleges? What should we know before going to college about Title IX?
Your school should definitely tell you about Title IX, not just who your Title IX coordinator is and how to contact that person, which is very important, but also about how to file a complaint if you feel you've been discriminated against, and what the school's process is for responding to complaints, and what your rights are. As we've talked about, it's important to teach kids as early as possible about their rights to help address this very serious problem. And Title IX protects you in college as well. So learning about your rights before you go to college will help you if you face any sort of discrimination at that level.
I've heard about schools teaching consent, like how students should communicate before sexual activity. Does consent have anything to do with Title IX rights?
It is important that students learn about healthy relationships, but consent education is not a substitute for education about Title IX. For example, let's say a girl consents to sexual activity with her partner but later breaks up with that person. Then the partner retaliates by harassing her and creating a hostile school environment. The fact that she once consented doesn't matter. She's still protected under Title IX, and her school needs to address the harassment.
If our school had gender equity, what would it be like?
Well, it would be an environment where all students felt they could benefit from their education, regardless of their gender identity, or sexual orientation. The school would proactively address sexual harassment before it happens. They would train everybody in their community about what it is, how to report it, and what the school will do about it.
What can we do to make our school more like that?
You can make sure that you know your rights, how to contact your Title IX coordinator, how to report sexual harassment, and what your school's process is for handling sexual harassment. And if any of these things aren't clear, you should ask your school officials to give you more information or explain. You can also learn more online from various groups about Title IX. You can go to OCR's website or the National Women's Law Center or Stop Sexual Assault in Schools and other organizations. These groups can help you if your school is lacking the necessary information.
Thanks. That's our last question for now.
Great. Let us know if you have more questions when your Gender Equality Club starts. And this is really important and great work you're doing.
Thank you.
Bye. She gave me an idea. Let's make a student's bill of rights with resources that students can put in their notebooks. We can post it around school too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really good. Oh, we gotta hurry up. They're expecting our Skype on LGBTQ students' rights.
Hi. Welcome to Equal Rights Advocates, and thanks for Skyping. I'm here to answer your questions about Title IX. So what can I help you with?
So we're starting a gender equity group at our school and talking with our school's Gay-Straight Alliance. We want to ask you about LGBTQ rights at school. We've heard about girls being protected against harassment from straight guys by Title IX, but can Title IX protect kids at our school from homophobic harassment?
Yeah, Title IX can help. Title IX protects everyone from harassment based on gender stereotypes, no matter what their gender identity or sexual orientation is. So, even though technically the law doesn't use the word sexual orientation, when someone's harassed for not acting the way people think boys or girls should act, that counts as gender-based harassment.
I'm not really sure what you mean. Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say there's a girl at your school who's a lesbian, and people are calling her a dyke and saying she looks like a man. That's covered under Title IX because she's getting harassed for not looking or acting like a stereotypical girl. If the school knows about the harassment, they have to take steps to make schools safe for her.
If my friend comes out as trans and wants to go by a different name and pronoun, does my school have to respect that?
Yes, they do. The school has to use the pronoun that's consistent with your friend's gender identity. It doesn't matter if they've started transition or even if they plan to. The school can't ask for medical proof. They also can't make your friend use bathrooms or locker rooms that are not consistent with your friend's gender identity.
But what if someone identifies as genderqueer and wants to go by they or z, or not even use pronouns at all?
That's a good question. So, it's the Office for Civil Rights in the federal government that explains to schools how Title IX applies, and they haven't explained yet how the rules about gender pronouns apply to kids who don't identify as male or female. But Title IX definitely protects kids with non-binary gender identities from being harassed because of their gender expression.
One of my gender non-conforming friends gets made fun of and shoved into lockers. Once, a kid even pulled his pants down. He told the principal, but instead of punishing the kid who did it, the principal said my friend should consider changing schools. He shouldn't be forced out because of these jerks. But what can he do if he already tried complaining to the principal?
Well, first of all, that principal should have investigated your friend's complaint, and they should have made sure the harassment stopped. But unfortunately, a lot of principals don't understand what their legal responsibilities are, and a lot of them also have their own prejudices. Under Title IX, every school district is required to have a Title IX coordinator whose job it is to make sure that complaints about gender-based harassment are handled properly. They're also required to have a fair complaint procedure and a policy against sex discrimination. Your friend should be able to take his complaint to your school district's Title IX coordinator. If the Title IX coordinator doesn't deal with the situation fairly, he can file a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights through their website. He can also ask for help from a lawyer or an advocacy organization.
What about sexual assault and dating violence? It happens in the LGBTQ community too.
That's a good point, and it's a subject we all need to talk more about. Any student of any gender or sexual orientation who experiences sexual assault or dating violence is protected by Title IX if their school environment becomes hostile and it interferes with their ability to learn. So even if a sexual assault didn't happen at school, you shouldn't have to sit in classes with someone who attacked you. In that situation, you should ask your school for help.
What can we do to make our school a safe place for LGBTQ students?
Well, it's great that you're coming together as a group and that your school has a gay-straight alliance. Student activism can be really powerful. I suggest that you find out whether your school district is complying with its responsibilities under Title IX, and if it isn't, advocate for change. You can start by reading your district's sexual harassment and anti-bullying policies. If they don't mention LGBTQ bullying, try to get your district to add that to the policy. I also recommend that if you have LGBTQ organizations in your community, you get connected to them. And remember, if your school district is breaking the law, you can file a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights or ask a lawyer or advocacy organization for help.
Great ideas. We'll try them. Thank you.
Thanks for Skyping.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She said to find out how our school is following Title IX. How are we going to do that?
We can use the Title IX checklist on the Stop Sexual Assault in Schools website. They also have links to a lot of fact sheets about Title IX. One huge problem is that a lot of schools don't even know what the Title IX coordinator is supposed to do. There was a program on TV about this. I want to show you a lawyer whose research was involved in that TV report. Now she's a Title IX coordinator.
Hi, come on in. Have a seat.
Hi.
Hi, what brings you here today?
Well, I read online that school districts are supposed to have a Title IX coordinator to help students dealing with sexual harassment.
Yes, that's true. I'm actually our district's Title IX coordinator. First, let me tell you a little bit about what I do as a Title IX coordinator, and then we can talk through a little bit about what's going on with your children.
Okay.
First, I help work with students and parents to inform them what Title IX is, which is a federal civil rights law that protects children from harassment. I help ensure that our school district complies with its obligations under Title IX to offer a safe learning environment that is free from all forms of gender discrimination. I help ensure that our district has a clear policy and procedures for handling sexual harassment complaints. I also conduct trainings with administrators and staff yearly, and I provide support throughout the year as issues arise to ensure that all students' rights under Title IX are being upheld. I also provide support for schools while they conduct Title IX investigations, also to ensure that each school is complying with the law. Do you mind if I take notes today to make sure that I'm getting down all of your information?
No, you don't mind if I do?
Absolutely not.
Okay, let me tell you what's going on. 3 of my kids are being harassed. My first grader, Zach, a boy forced him to perform sexual acts in the boys' bathroom. Now, when I told the principal, he told me to stop overreacting. He said, oh, boys will be boys, and kids their age aren't capable of sexual assault. But now Zach, he's afraid to go to school. Then there's Emma, my daughter in middle school. The boys, well, they grab her butt and her breasts, and a couple of the boys, they make sexual gestures to her in class when the teacher isn't looking. Well, Emma told her counselor that she can't concentrate in class. So he said that he would call the boys in and talk to them. Well, afterwards he told her that the boys deny everything. So he said they could all sit down and have a restorative meeting so that all the students could be on the same page. But the boys, they just deny everything again. Right away afterwards, they start teasing and harassing her even more. I told the school again that nothing had been done about the original harassment or the retaliation that followed. Then my oldest daughter, Chloe, she's having a problem with her engineering teacher. I mean, she's taking the class even though the counselor at school told her that engineering is a better class for guys. Well, when she said she wanted to take the class anyway, he told her that she was going to have a really hard time because she's a girl. Well, Chloe took the class anyway. And on the second day, her engineering teacher started to comment on how nice Chloe looks. Then the next day, he leaned in and he touched her leg while he was looking at her work. Then he gives her his cell phone number in case she needs any extra help. He told her that he could help her to get better grades if they met outside of school. I mean, Chloe is afraid to tell anybody about him, and she's worried that it's going to affect her grade.
I'm so sorry that your kids are all going through this. Have the schools done anything to stop the harassment other than what you just told me?
No, they haven't. It's crucial that this harassment stops immediately. I need my kids to feel safe and supported at school, and it's just not happening. What can you do to help me?
Well, do you wish to file a formal complaint with the school? If so, I'll designate an individual at each school to begin formal investigation process of each of these complaints. Let me tell you how the investigation will look. The investigator will start by speaking with your children to obtain additional information. They will also want to know if you have any documentation that shows that you informed the school of these complaints. They will also ask you to identify any other students, staff members, anyone else who might have information that can help to understand what's going on and what each of the schools have done. After that, the investigator will go to the school and speak with the principals, teachers, students, or anyone else that you've identified as having information. The school has 60 days to complete its investigation and issue a written notice of outcome. I will oversee each investigation to ensure that the process is equitable and timely. If you're not comfortable with anyone at the school district conducting the investigation, you can file a formal complaint with my office as the Title IX coordinator, and I can oversee and actually conduct the investigation myself. And it'll go through the same process that I mentioned before, but it would be my office doing it instead of the school site. Also, when there's no sexual assault, you can go through a less formal process and try to resolve the matter with the other students through mediation or other restorative practices, if they are done correctly, that is. Given what you told me, though, I think these cases are severe enough that the less formal process would not necessarily be appropriate. but I wanted to tell you that nonetheless. In the meantime, I will contact the principals to make sure that while the investigation is going, the school takes immediate steps to stop the harassment. Are there any specific accommodations you need while the investigations are taking place?
Like what?
Like a safety plan to keep the students apart, counseling services, or extra time to complete an assignment that are late as a result of the hostile environment?
I'll have to get back to you if any additional accommodations are needed. But it is really important, I think, that all my kids get safety plans put in place immediately. Especially in Emma's case, because she was immediately retaliated against and she's regretting saying anything.
Well, Title IX also protects students and parents from retaliation for reporting sexual harassment of any kind of sex discrimination. This would also be the case for Chloe. For example, she cannot get a lower grade because she complained about the harassment. One of my jobs is to ensure that you and your children are not punished or retaliated against for reporting sexual harassment. If there is retaliation, I will take strong corrective action. I will address this on my first call to the principal and put any additional protections in motion to keep further retaliation from occurring. It's also important that you check in with Emma and all your kids regularly to find out if it is continuing at school and to let me know immediately so that I can work with the school to keep her safe.
But what if Emma wants the behavior to stop and she wants an investigation, but she doesn't want anyone to know that she's filed a formal complaint after the restorative conference with the counselor?
Many students don't report sexual harassment or violence because they fear revealing their name, and some do not want any investigation to take place or the harasser to be punished. My job is to honor the students' wishes for confidentiality as much as possible. At the same time, I have to ensure that the school environment is safe and free from sexual discrimination for all students, including your daughter. We encourage students to report because that might encourage their friends to report also, so then the school environment can become much healthier. If the student insists on full confidentiality, I should tell you that it might limit the district's ability to investigate and seek any additional remedies and/or punish any of the students. I think you should definitely talk to Emma about these options and get back to me. I want to be sure to respect her and your wishes before I speak to the principal and begin an investigation.
This is all so great. Thank you very much. I had no idea that a Title IX coordinator could help us with all these problems. You know, I saw a TV report online which said that the Bay Area principals even don't know about Title IX. Why is it that people just don't know about Title IX? So many people don't know.
Title IX has been the law for over 40 years, but unfortunately, staff and students in many, if not most, K-12 schools across the country are not adequately trained on the protections, the rights, and responsibilities under Title IX. Fortunately, there are national organizations such as the American Association of University Women, Equal Rights Advocates, the National Women's Law Center, Stop Sexual Assault in Schools, Public Justice, Feminist Majority Foundation, Legal Momentum, and Know Your Nine, and who are all working to raise awareness that Title IX not only applies to colleges, but to K-12 schools as well.
Well, it really would have helped if we'd known about the Title IX coordinator before all this happened. How can we get the word out about what you do?
Title IX coordinators are responsible for training teachers and staff members to make sure that they can identify issues that arise under Title IX. Once teachers and staff members are better trained, they can help students through these difficult situations and inform them of their rights. Districts should also send annual notices about their sexual harassment and gender discrimination policies to teachers, staff, and students. Districts and schools should also make resources easily available online so that the students and parents can find the information about Title IX and how the complaint process works. I encourage parents to invite Title IX coordinators to their parent-teacher organization meetings to learn about Title IX, and I always encourage students to form groups to learn how to continue to spread the word about Title IX and become advocates for this very, very important issue.
Well, okay, I think it would be better if the district and your office investigates. I think the best thing would be to create the safety plans, and then you can start your investigations.
That sounds like a great plan. I also want to tell you that I plan to speak with the school counselor who discouraged Chloe from taking engineering class. That's a form of gender discrimination too. And I'll make sure that the counselor whom your daughter reported the harassment to gets trained so that students know the reports are being taken seriously. As for Chloe's teacher, I'll be in touch with the Human Resource Department, who will be looped into the investigation as well. They will go through their normal processes also. And Chloe will not have to take class while the investigation is taking place. So please assure her that we'll be making other arrangements for her engineering class. So please speak to your kids about what we talked about and let me know if they need any other accommodations, and I'll get started with contacting the principals today.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to know that there is a Title IX coordinator to help students and parents with these issues.
You're very, very welcome. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
After we use the Title IX checklist, let's get our parent-teacher organization to invite the Title IX coordinator to make a presentation. We'll see what the coordinator knows.
If Title IX coordinators did their jobs, kids wouldn't have to put up with sexual harassment or leave the school when it does nothing about it.
Right. A lot of lives would have been saved if the Title IX coordinator just did their job. I know that was a lot to take in.
Should we take a break?
Yeah. It's Skype time again. This time we're finding out what to do when schools don't follow Title IX.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thanks so much for contacting Public Justice today. I understand you've started a gender equity club in your high school, which is great, and that you have some questions about how your school is handling reports of sexual assault.
Yeah, we do. There's a lot of sexual harassment at our school. A girl was sexually assaulted by another student in a music practice room. Her parents asked the principal what he was going to do about it. He said they were still investigating, but it's already been several months, and the principal hasn't told the family when the investigation will be finished. Do you see any problem?
Yes, I see two problems, one involving the length of the investigation and the other involving communication with the family. Under Title IX, schools are required to conduct a prompt and thorough investigation, and generally they should complete their investigation within 60 days. And this is true even if there's an ongoing criminal investigation. Schools can't delay until the criminal investigation is over. Under Title IX, schools are also supposed to give students and their families periodic updates on the status of the investigation. It sounds like this isn't happening.
The girl who was sexually assaulted is missing a lot of school. Shouldn't the school be doing something to help her while it's investigating?
Absolutely. While schools are investigating, they have to provide victims with reasonable accommodations, free of charge, to make sure that victims can continue their education and other school activities in a safe environment. And schools have to let victims know what accommodations are available, such as free mental health counseling and other health services, academic tutoring, and help from victims' advocates. So let's say the victim's family ends up paying for an outside therapist or a tutor. The school should reimburse the family for these expenses. Schools may also have to accommodate victims by taking steps to separate the victims from the students who assaulted them.
The girl assaulted in the music room definitely doesn't want to see her attacker, but they see each other in the hallways a lot and have some classes together. The school hasn't done anything to prevent this, so the girl often avoids coming to school. Shouldn't our school be doing more to separate them?
Yes. Title IX requires schools to take steps to make sure that victims can continue their education in a safe environment. For example, to make sure that the girl isn't confronted by her attacker in common areas like the hallways and cafeteria, her school could create a safety plan that includes increased supervision and security while she's at school or attending school events. Also, the girl shouldn't have to continue taking classes with her attacker. The school should change the students' course schedules to fix this. I really want to emphasize here that Title IX requires schools to minimize the disruption to the victims. So schools shouldn't make victims change their course schedules. Schools should change the harasser schedules and move them to different classes.
Our school is small. Often there's only one class on a subject, so moving the harasser to a different class isn't a real option. What should our school do?
Your school can have the harasser take the shared class online instead. And another option is to move the harasser to a different school within the district or move the victim to another school if that's what the victim prefers. The bottom line here is that Title IX requires schools to try to put the burden of these changes on the harasser rather than the victim. And in cases of severe sexual harassment, such as a rape, victims may also want to get a protection order from a court that prohibits the attacker from having contact with the victim in or out of school. The school would then be required to enforce that no contact order at school and school-related activities. Students who are sexually assaulted shouldn't have to leave their school to feel safe.
Another girl at our school was raped by a football player during a party at a friend's house. She told the principal, but he said there's nothing he can do because the rape didn't happen at school. Is that right?
No, your principal's wrong. When a student reports a sexual assault that happened off school grounds, schools can't just ignore it. Title IX requires schools to evaluate whether the off-campus violence is having a negative impact on the victim's learning environment at school. Most of the time, the violence does adversely affect victims, particularly if victims regularly see their attackers at school. Another problem that often comes up is that after a student is raped off campus, the attacker and his friends harass the victim at school. Title IX doesn't allow schools to ignore this either. Schools have a responsibility to protect victims from ongoing harassment that disrupts their education. And this is true even if the school ultimately determines that there isn't enough evidence to find that the victim was raped. If the victim is harassed for reporting a rape, the school must take steps to stop that harassment.
A boy at our school was raped and stopped coming to school because no one investigated his report or did anything to make sure he felt safe at school. What can victims like him do?
Victims have quite a few options for trying to get their schools to do a better job of addressing sexual assault complaints. One is that they can complain to the school district. Sometimes a district will take action when an individual school fails to do so. Some school districts have a district-level Title IX coordinator or another official who oversees the Title IX coordinators at each school. Also, Title IX requires schools to publish clear instructions on how, where, and with whom to file a Title IX complaint, as well as how to appeal a decision. So victims and their families should review those instructions very carefully. In my experience, many schools and districts don't have clear instructions on filing a complaint about sexual assault. In those cases, it's likely that victims won't get the help they need from the school district and will have to consider other options.
What other options?
The victim's family can file a Title IX complaint with the United States Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, commonly known as OCR. OCR has regional offices throughout the country, and OCR has a complaint form that you can complete and submit online. No lawyers needed to do that. After you submit a complaint, OCR decides whether to investigate your school based on the information you provide. If OCR decides to investigate, it'll gather information from the victim and the school and will often try to work out a resolution with the school district. Sometimes this results in changes to the school's policies and procedures for addressing gender violence, new training and education programs, and reimbursement for expenses the victim's family paid to address the impact that the sexual assault had on the victim. But this process can take a while, often longer than a year.
Are there any other options?
Yes, victims and their families can seek legal advice. Now, not everybody can afford to hire an attorney, but there are some victims' rights groups that provide legal representation for free or at reduced rates. You can find information on some of these groups at the Stop Sexual Assault in Schools website at ssais.org.
A girl at our school reported that she was sexually assaulted. Then the school ended up suspending her for having sexual contact at school. Basically, the school blamed her for sexual activity that was actually an assault. Isn't that wrong?
Your instinct is really good. Schools shouldn't punish students who report that they were sexually assaulted. When schools do this, they make students feel like they can't safely report sexual assaults. Also, when a school punishes a student who reports a sexual assault, the school may be violating Title IX. Students who report sexual assaults are protected under Title IX, and schools can't punish them for reporting. That's called retaliation. The victim can challenge the school's punishment, in this case a suspension, under the district's process for disputing school discipline. This often involves a disciplinary hearing at the school to start, but families can usually appeal the school's decision to the district. And if they're unhappy with the result at the district level, they can often appeal to the State Board of Education. Again, your school should have clear instructions on how, where, and with whom to file an appeal. Also, it may help victims and their families to have an attorney represent them throughout this process.
Some of our friends have experienced dating violence. If they tell their school that they're being abused by a student they're dating, does the school have to do something?
Yes, schools shouldn't ignore reports about student-on-student dating violence. Dating violence often raises issues under Title IX that schools have to address. Title IX requires schools to address students' reports of sexual violence, period. This is true when the victim is abused by a student the victim is dating, a student the victim is friends with, or a student the victim didn't even know before the sexual assault. Now, in some cases, dating violence may not involve sexual abuse. For example, the violence might involve a beating or emotional abuse. So let's say a student tells the principal that her boyfriend is beating her and that she's afraid to be in school with him. Even though she hasn't reported sexual violence, the school still needs to take action under Title IX. This is because the school is obligated to determine whether the physical abuse this girl is suffering is gender-based. In many circumstances, there's a gender component to dating violence of this kind, and Title IX would apply.
What are some ways we can improve the environment at our school so we can stop dealing with all this sexual harassment?
Creating a gender equality club is a great step in helping to improve the environment at your school. You can also connect with other school clubs and your school's parent-teacher organization to share what your club is doing. And you may even want to collaborate with them on projects to raise awareness of students' Title IX rights.
We can definitely use these ideas. Thanks for Skyping.
Sure. If you have any other questions down the road, just let me know. This is really important work that you're doing.
Thank you.
But what about students who've experienced dating violence or sexual harassment or assault and don't want to talk to their parents or the school? Where can they get help?
They can contact community organizations, like a sexual assault crisis center. I want to show you a scene where a girl calls in after being assaulted.
Good afternoon, this is Cheryl from the Sexual Assault Resource Center.
How can I help you?
Hi, I need some help. Something happened at school.
Okay, I can help you. Would you like to tell me your name?
It's Christy.
Hi, Christy.
When did something happen to you?
Last weekend, a guy raped me. I don't want anyone else to know. He said if I told anyone, no one would believe me. I'm scared. Some kids are talking about me online. His friends are saying that I wanted it.
Oh, Christy, that must be so difficult. I'm sorry you're going through that.
Before we talk any further, let me just tell you about state law called mandated reporting. If you're under 18, then I am legally bound to make a report to either the police or social services. If you don't want me to make a report, please don't give me any information that identifies you, such as your last name, your address, or your phone number.
Okay.
Christy, are you hurt? Are you having pain?
I have a few bruises and pains from what happened. I don't feel like eating. I'm mostly scared.
Those are really normal feelings after a sexual assault or a rape. Have you been able to tell anyone what happened?
Well, I told my best friend, but I made her promise not to tell anyone.
Okay. Have you been able to talk to your mom or your dad?
I'm afraid to tell them. That'll just make it worse.
How about the police? Have you made a police report?
No way.
Okay.
Can you tell me where the sexual assault happened?
It was over the weekend at school after a game. I was one of the last people to leave, and he said he'd give me a ride home.
Would you be comfortable telling me what happened next?
He drove to a dark place nearby and, well, he raped me. He said if you tell anyone, they won't believe you, and he let me off a few blocks from my house.
Did your mom and dad see you or say anything when you got home after that?
No, my parents were already asleep. But the next day, my mom asked me what was wrong, and I just told her I got in an argument with a friend. I told her I wanted to be by myself.
Have you been back to school?
No, I can't sleep. I have nightmares. I'm exhausted. I told my mom that I was sick and couldn't go back to school.
You sound exhausted, sweetie.
A lot of people have nightmares and trouble sleeping after they've been assaulted. It's really normal to be feeling those things. And I bet you don't want to go back to school right now.
What are you worried about with going back to school? Can you tell me about that?
I miss seeing my friends. I don't feel like myself. I'm scared. Even if I tried, I wouldn't be able to focus on work. I'm missing soccer practice. I just can't face seeing him and hearing what everyone will say about me. I'm afraid to look at my phone. I'm afraid to talk to anyone.
Being fearful is very, very normal.
What are you most worried about with this rape?
Yeah, well, I'm afraid of being pregnant. My parents would kill me if that happened. Or I'm afraid of STDs and the medical bills that would come along with that. My family can't afford that.
Oh, Christy, I'm so sad that you're going through this. It is very scary and confusing, this whole situation, but my role is to help give you some information about some options that you have.
Would it help to talk about some of those options?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, one of the things I'd like to recommend today is getting you over to the hospital for a forensic exam.
Now, I want to remind you that in our state, if you're under 18, the doctors and the nurses will have to make a mandated report to the police or the social services people. Now, you told me you're worried about pregnancy and STDs.
They can help you with both of those concerns. There's medicine to help prevent a pregnancy, and there's medicine to help prevent STDs.
Now, the other thing I'd like to recommend today is a forensic exam where they collect some evidence, taking some samples from your body, the doctors and the nurses. Now, I want to assure you
that is free. In our state, we have crime victims compensation and they pay for that exam, so your mom and dad aren't going to get stuck with any bills.
Now, one of the things I also want to mention is that you can have an advocate go with you to the hospital so you're not alone.
What does the advocate do?
Well, the advocate does a lot of things. They can be with you for the exam. They can give you information about your legal rights. They can also talk to you about your right to
go back to school and feel safe.
What rights?
Once you tell your school that you've been sexually harassed, assaulted, or raped by another student,
the school has to take immediate steps to keep you safe and enable you to go to school without feeling harassed or retaliation. They have to do this because there's a federal law called Title IX.
What kind of steps?
Well, for example, they have to make arrangements that you don't have to be in a class with the guy who raped you. You don't have to have any contact with him at the school.
They also have to take steps to address any bullying or retaliation that you're feeling. They can help create a safety plan to help you feel and stay safe at school.
Who can I talk to school about this?
It's a great question, Christy.
They have an officer called the Title IX officer or the Title IX coordinator. Every school has to have one, or every school district. It's a federal law. And we can look up that information online. The victim's advocate will probably have that information, and we can also call the school anonymously to get that person's contact name and information.
I didn't know about any of this. Thank you. Thank you for telling me.
You're so welcome, and a lot of people don't understand this and know that. That's why I'm here to help with this.
If you could just hold on for a moment, I'm going to look up the name and number of the advocate on call today, and we're going to get you connected so we can go through the next steps to keep you safe
and get you the help that you need today.
Next week, we can watch a scene where a student calls a victim's advocate to find out about privacy, how to be safe, and get back to school after an assault. We can watch a video about how a school counselor should treat students who report being assaulted. I'm also getting some information on how the school is supposed to investigate when kids are harassed or assaulted. They'll be on our website, ssais.org/video.
Okay, but before we go, let's brainstorm some things we can do.
Okay, we really need to check out this online guide called Campus Activism, How to Become a Now Activist in High School. It is everything we need to make our gender equality club successful.
I know a couple of advisors who'd be into helping us.
Okay, I'm making anti-harassment and Title IX posters. I'm gonna make a poster that says, does gender equality exist in our school, and put the time of our meetings.
I'm writing about this for the school paper.
Let's make zines. We need a Facebook page. How about making PSAs and put them online?
I'm definitely calling out guys who are harassing. I'm taking some Title IX fact sheets to the community center where I work.
How about getting people to take a pledge against sexual harassment?
Oh, yeah. How about getting coaches and teachers to take the pledge for the kind of sexual harassment they do?
Okay, let's end with a couple activism videos we can get ideas from and talk about next week.
I'm Minna, a high school junior and the youngest member of the Stop Sexual Assault in Schools Advisory Board. For the last 3 years, I've been educating high school students about sexual harassment and assault. Here are some ways we can protect students and promote equality. First, share this video with everyone, with friends, clubs, schools, adults, parent-teacher organizations, community organizations, local media, and even lawmakers. You can find out how at ssais.org/video. I found that films and online videos are great ways to start this important discussion. One of my favorite films is It Happened Here, which I screened in several high schools. It tells how 5 courageous female survivors fought for their Title IX rights.
Why didn't they look at her as a victim?
When they blame victims, discredit them, they are doing damage to that woman.
They're just getting away with this? Not anymore.
I have made a decision to no longer remain silent.
I published a letter in the hopes that somebody would realize what was going on.
I wanted to blow the lid off the whole thing.
Wasn't the school I went to?
These young women have demonstrated true courage. They have spoken truth to power.
Another powerful film I like is Unslut, a documentary film about the negative effects of slut-shaming. When we stop slut-shaming, students will be empowered to stand up for their Title IX rights at school.
She was raped, and then not only was she raped, but then she's isolated.
The Halifax teen took her own life after she was allegedly gang raped and bullied when photos of the attack circulated online.
Watching online videos about healthy masculinity, gender equality, and sexual objectification in the media is a great way to start the discussion. You can find a list of suggested videos and films at ssais.org/video. I also like making PSA videos by interviewing kids at school about sexual harassment and gender equality. Share your videos with your school, community, and online. You can also make PSAs to take a stand. Here's a clip from a PSA showing boys taking a stand against sexual assault at Tumwater High School.
The following numbers were obtained using national statistics and applying them to Tumwater High School. Actual data from THS is not available.
K3 Tumwater High School senior girls will be sexually assaulted before they leave Tumwater High School, and I say no more.
Another idea is to write articles for your school paper or publish zines. Here's an important high school magazine issue about rape culture that received local and national media attention. Starting a blog or a Facebook page is another way to share your activism and videos. Gender equality clubs are perfect for raising awareness, inspiring people to act and making real change. Getting started is easy with a guide called Campus Activism: How to Become a Now Activist in High School. You can also check out the Stop Sexual Assault in Schools website for other activism ideas. We must raise awareness about the right to an equal education free from sexual harassment and gender discrimination in K-12 schools.
Sexual harassment and assault are traumatic experiences that can affect all aspects of a person's life. For students, that hurt cause can be compounded by social isolation and harassment through social media. Sexual assault is already drastically underreported by students who fear the negative reactions by others, particularly being blamed for their own assaults. When school staff can respond compassionately, more students who have these experiences will be likely to access very needed resources. Properly trained school staff will create a safe, supportive, and Title IX compliant environment. There are actions you can take right now to make your school safer from sexual harassment. You can invite community experts from your local rape crisis centers and coalitions to provide training on trauma-informed response to students for counselors, administrators, and even teachers. Using Title IX fact sheets, you can develop resources such as brochures, posters, notebook inserts, or even videos outlining students' rights to confidentiality, what their rights are under Title IX, and highlight important resources. You can engage your parent-teacher organizations and start gender equity clubs and events at your school. Now is the time to start this discussion and to keep it going.
To make our schools free from sexual harassment, we must all be involved. We must talk about it, learn about it, support those who have experienced it, and hold those accountable who commit it. It is especially important that males become involved in this movement. Consider starting a healthy male identity club at school. Watch online videos by men who support healthy maleness. Post supportive articles on social media. Partner with gender equity groups and model respectful behavior. While most men are actually uncomfortable with other men's sexist behavior, many don't know what to do when it happens. Learn about bystander intervention so that you can do something positive when others say inappropriate sexual comments. Be the one to speak up for others and respect your partner. Men and boys need to explore the freedom to be full human beings by moving beyond rigid gender roles and expectations of dominance, control, and violence. We as males have to hold each other to a loving and respectful standard. Love is courageous and strong. Respect is a sign of our self-confidence. We have the power to end sexual harassment and sexual violence.
As a civil rights attorney, I frequently witness how sexual harassment and assault shatters K-12 families. I see parents who are overwhelmed, confused, and angry, not only by what happened to their student, but by their school's indifference, denial, or outright hostility. These aren't just other families' problems. The perpetrator of sexual harassment or assault may be a student or a school employee who has frequent contact with your student. Your student may have witnessed or heard about sexual harassment or assault and may feel uncomfortable or unsafe at school. If a school discounts or dismisses reports of sexual harassment or assault, your student may feel discouraged from reporting, or may even be a victim of sexual harassment but not told anyone. This is a community problem. That's why adults must take action. Here's some ideas. First, start the discussion. Go online and learn about school sexual harassment, sexual assault, cyber harassment, and dating violence. Learn about the signs of trauma and victims. Talk with your student about how sexual harassment is prohibited at school, just like it is in the workplace. Help your student recognize sexual exploitation, grooming, and abuse by teachers or staff. Encourage students to stand up to harassment and discrimination, whether against themselves or others. Reach out to students who are uncomfortable talking with their families. Next, read your school's anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policies. They must be available online or from your school's office. They should define sexual harassment and explain what actions the school takes when it learns of sexual harassment or discrimination. Find out what the school is doing proactively about sexual harassment. Provide your school with Title IX fact sheets that are available on the Stop Sexual Assault in Schools website. Visit the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights website for many helpful resources. Next, make sure your school district has a Title IX coordinator. Use the checklist that accompanies this presentation to make sure they understand their responsibilities. The Title IX coordinator's contact information must be publicly available. When you speak to the Title IX coordinator, ask, what does the district do to promote gender equality in the classroom and in school activities? Ask, what does the school do to educate students about gender stereotypes and sex discrimination? Ask, does the school educate staff on how to compassionately treat students who report sexual harassment? Ask, does the school educate staff on how to handle sexual assault complaints and how to address retaliation if it occurs? Finally, support the formation of school clubs that address gender equality. Bottom line, sexual harassment and violence are a reality in K-12 schools. We can't ignore it any longer. Unfortunately, by the time parents come to see me, their lives have already been devastated by the sexual harassment or assault of their student and by the school's response. It doesn't have to be this way. If we all take action, we can make our schools safe places to learn for everyone and prevent the far-reaching, long-lasting effects of sexual harassment and assault.
We really have to share this information with our friends. We all need it. So do our parents. Our group is going to make change.
thing for the parents, maybe talk to them a little bit more.
Oh, that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
A lot more people have been going to the GSA meetings, which is cool.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I recruited some of my friends and they're in.
That's
awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And a lot more guys seem to know what's going on. It seemed like it was mostly the girls before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe we could have like a club color. I'm thinking blue.
Yeah.